Hey, welcome back, buddies. This is vlog number 4. This is a little view of my backyard from the top deck. It's pretty nice. I mean, it's the desert, but I've got some trees and flowers and grass and all that good stuff. Anyway, today we are at the pepper mill in Nevada, and we are at 1-3. Takes a little bit of time to get a seat, some ups and downs, and we end on an interesting note. So let's get to it. It is June 12th. We are back at the pepper mill. It's super bright out. It's also like 100 degrees and getting warmer. So we are at the top of the list for 1-3, and we shouldn't be too long to get a table. Sometimes it takes a little while, but we'll just buy in for our standard 2 and see what happens. Let's get to it. It's time to start handing out some buddy bucks. Our first hand, there's an under the gun straddle for $6 with 2 callers. I make it 25 to go from the cutoff with Queen Jack. Both limpers call. Flop is Ace King 7. They check to me. I only have 123 left. There's 1.5 in the pot. This board is amazing for my range with the nut and range advantage. Both of them checking to me. I'm going to be betting this board 100% of the time. I have such a small SPR, but I have the nut draw, so I go ahead and put maximum pressure on these guys and just shove it all in. Doesn't even make it past the first guy. He calls. The river and turn are blanks. He takes it down. In hand number 2, it's important to note that the people on my right are quite splashly and aggressive, so I can get away with playing a few extra hands against them, especially if it's cheap. After they limp in, I follow suit with King 10. The flop comes 4 King 3. It's checked to me, and I should really be betting here with only one guy to go, but the guy behind me is quite aggressive, and if he has anything, I expect him to bet 100% of the time. My kicker's low, but otherwise I'm not too worried about any cards except an ace of the turn. So I decided to balance a bit and check. I still prefer a small bet here because it's a limped pot, but it does check through, and the turn comes the Queen of Spades. The under the gun bets out $10. I'm not too worried right now, but I don't want to puff out the pot with a mediocre hand. If I call, then the guy behind me can call very loose, and the bettor keeps all his bluffs in, and he's very capable of bluffing. So I just call. The river is the Queen of Diamonds. This is one of the worst cards for me. If they bet or called with a queen, then I'm dead now. The under the gun bets out 50. It's a pretty polarized bet. The guy is capable of bluffing. 2 queens on the board. Drops the combos he could have. It's possible he had a flush draw, straight draw, 8x of hearts, a weak king, some middling pair. I have a bluff catcher, and while the bet is just over pot, it's still a small amount in these deep 1-3s. I like to call, and the guy behind me folds. Under the gun shows Queen 3 offsuit. We're in the small blind. The hijack limps in. The button makes it 12. He's very loose aggressive. I've got ace king, so I make it 35. The big blind folds. The hijack folds, but then the button, who hates money, makes the call. Flop comes 4 deuce 4. It's not a great flop for either of us. However, whoever was ahead pre-flop is likely still ahead. I want to keep the pressure on any of his connectors and middle pairs. I don't need to bet very much on this board, so I bet out 20. He thinks for a few seconds and folds. Now we're in the button. There's 2 limpers, and we look down at pocket 10s. Obviously, we're making a bet here, so I throw out 17. The small blind is the only taker. Flop comes 4 ace 5, all hearts. We're not too happy with this flop. It looks good for our range, but all we have is a mediocre hand with a weak flush draw. We could easily be behind here, but there are also a ton of junk hands in his range. He checks, we bet our range at half pot, and he calls pretty quickly. Turn is the 3 of clubs. He checks again. Him check calling the flop and checking the turn really narrows down his range to a made flush, set, heart draw, or possibly 2 pair, looking for a cheap showdown. I go ahead and bet out 25 to put pressure on drawing hands. He pretty quickly makes the call again. 5 of clubs on the river. He thinks for quite a while, and then throws out a $50 bet. With the board pairing, flushes have gone down a bit in value. This doesn't make much sense unless he had pocket 4s or a misdraw. Even though it's not a polarized bet, it still smells like one. I consider all these things for a while. Finally, deciding that since I've seen him bluff before, I know it's possible. I make the call, only needing to be right less than 25% of the time. He flips over 5-6 offsuit, a much worse hand than should be calling down. I take note of this for later. I didn't have a chance to add on, and we pick up a decent hand, and there are 4 limpers in front of me. I go ahead and just shove my stack with King Jack. I've got a lot of equity against these limpers, and the pot is already 16, and I only have $54. Only one caller. The board comes 9, 7, 5, 4, 2. Complete missed. He quickly flips over his hand, says he nailed it on the flop, shows a6 offsuit. That was 64% pre-flop, and he was getting 42% on his call with these exact 2 hands. Overall, I think I cost him a bunch of money by shoving my short stack, as it's likely he would have been able to get a lot more money from the limpers with his exact holding. I top off and pick up King Queen in the hijack. There are 2 limpers, I make it 18. The cutoff, the +1, both call. Flop comes Jack, Deuce, Deuce. All I have here is a backdoor straight draw and pair draws. I decide to check, and the cutoff makes it 25 to go. With nothing here, no showdown value, I don't think it makes sense to call out of position against the luck box. I just toss this one away and wait for a better spot. If I was in position, I would be much more inclined to call, having the possibility of stealing it on a later straight. That's on me under the gun. I look down at 9-8 of hearts. This is in my opening range against these players, so I toss out 11. The cutoff and the big blind both call. Comes Queen, Queen, 9. This isn't too bad flop for my holding. There are very few queens left for them to have. There are straight draws and under pairs they could have. Hands that have equity against me like Ace Jack or Ace 10 will probably fold to a bet, while a smaller pair might call a small bet. So I lead out for 15, targeting all those hands. If I could take it down right now, that is also a good result. The cutoff throws out some chips, but the big blind folds. This narrows down his range to Queen X, 9X, Jack 10, Ace King, Ace Jack, Ace 10, pocket pairs, folding out the bottom of his range. Turn comes to 5 of clubs. This is a blank, but it brings in the backdoor club draw. There's still a bunch of hands he could have here that I'm ahead of that would call a small bet, or cards with equity that could fold to a small bet. So I make it 20, he insta calls. The river is the 10 of clubs. He is going to be folding out the bottom part of his range again, so his hand has become stronger. Any 10x holding now beats me, as does King Jack and Jack 8, which are possible given the small bet sizes. He could have been slow playing a monster as well. There is no way I can get 3 streets of value, so I elect to check. Maybe he will decide to bluff at it. If he bets small, I can call. If he bets big, I'll just reluctantly fold. He does bet small, only 25. I only have to be good here 16% of the time to make this a profitable call. It's a small bet. There's a small chance I could have the winner here. I don't see a reason to turn my hand into a bluff with such a great price. I decided call. He flips over King Queen for a slow played monster. Things are not going our way. Maybe this hand will make up for it. We're in hand number 8. We're on the button. The middle position limps. The low jack makes it 16. I call with King Queen, and the big blind calls. We are going 3 ways to the flop. 4, 4, 3. This flop really shouldn't hit anyone. I've got the backdoor second nut flush draw. Low jack continues for 35. He loves betting big. He also is fully capable of bluffing and does so often. This is a pretty big bet for this board. It seems like he has a couple of big cards. I decide to call, as a ton of turn cards improve my hand. Big blind folds, and the flop comes 8 of diamond. This is one of the cards I was looking for. He checks, and I'm going to stick with the plan and bet big here. 120 polarized bet sounds perfect. Oh wait, no. I really don't know why I didn't bet this turn. The river is the 7 of hearts and completely misses my hand. Now I've got absolutely nothing. I suppose I could bluff here on the river, but what would I be representing? 5, 6 maybe? Calling on the flop would have made sense. Checking back the turn would also make sense without a diamond. He checks to me, and I've got one last chance to represent a hand. There is no way I can win if I check behind. So I'm going to bet polarized here instead. No, I'm not. I'm just going to check behind and give him the win. That was played absolutely horrible by me. I missed 2 perfect opportunities to take it down. All I had to do was bet. He shows ace high and takes it down. Under the gun limps. The under the gun, small blind, and big blind all have pretty big stacks, so I go ahead and limp as well with Queen 9 of hearts. The low jack and the small blind both limp as expected, and then the big blind raises it up. 20 isn't enough to get anyone out of the pot with these deep stacks, so we all call, and we are going 5 ways to the flop with 115 in the pot. 5, king, deuce, boom. That's a pretty good flop for my hand multi-way. The small blind checks, and the aggressive big blind bets out 100. I've got about 345 and have him covered. I think it's time to apply max pressure. I've missed some bets before this, and I don't want to miss another one. If a scare card comes on the turn, especially a heart, he's probably not going to put any more money into the pot. After the under the gun folds, I decided it's time for a Buddy Buck Buffet. It's all you can eat, and it's folded back around to the big blind, who doesn't take too long to call. He immediately flips over his hand. King Jack. The turn is the 5 of spades. No help on the turn. The 5 doesn't really change anything anyway, but I wasn't going for a pair. Okay, this seems to work out for Brad pretty well, so let's see if it'll work out for me. On the count of 3, everybody hit the like button. If everyone does it, maybe we can finally hit a draw. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. 7 of hearts on the river. We nailed it. Thanks, everybody. I take this big pot down. We're in the big blind. We look down at King 10. There's 4 limpers in front of us. I could be betting here with blockers, but I don't think that I'll be able to clear the field. At least 2 of these guys will call with a wide range, so I decide to see what the flop brings and try to outplay them after the flop. The flop comes 2, 10, 5. I check out of position, and the hijack thinks he needs to take a stab. He throws out a bet of $10. The button calls. I was checking on the flop to balance my range on a really safe board. No way I'm folding top pair here. I call. It's now 3 ways to the turn. Turn comes a king. Wow. Now I've got top 2 pair on a pretty safe board. I get the feeling the hijack is going to be checking behind it, and I can't count on the button betting his card. There are a ton of hands that will call a bet here, but not bet out, so I lead out for 25. The hijack does fold, but the button comes along. River comes an ace. This is a pretty good card. The diamond's missed, and unless he has exactly ace 10 or 3-4, I should still be good. The ace might be a scare card for him, but how many ace-x am I betting on the turn after calling the flop? Not nearly as many as he's calling with. Ace-x diamonds hit top pair here. There are quite a few hands that could call a bet. I decide on a small bet to get any one pair to call. He thinks about it for quite a while, does finally make the call after thinking and tapping his cards on the table. My 2 pair is good enough to take this one down. This is our first premium, and we're making it 15 to go from middle position with Queen Queen. The hijack, button, small blind all make the call. We're going 4 ways to the flop. It comes 6-9-6. Not too bad of a flop. I have an overpair and backdoor clubs. I bet out 30. The button thinks a little bit and makes a call. Now the small blind raises to 100. It's pretty standard squeeze play here, except I've never seen either of these 2 people bluff. While the button might not have much, the small blind could easily have a 6 here. There are some other hands he could be doing this with that I am beating, but I'll have to face a likely shove on the turn, and the only card I would like to see is a queen. I decide to play it safe, throwing this one away. It's been relatively easy to pick up pots, so no need to push this one. Our next hand, we're in the big blind, the under the gun, and +1 limp. The middle position decides to make it 15. Button and small blind both call. They are loose, aggressive players with big stacks, so I call as well. Under the gun calls, +1 calls. This is the first hand we're really playing with +1, who is a self-proclaimed master of poker, probably the best on the planet. He's been playing for a whole 10 days and has never lost a session. He says he knows everything there is to know. From now on, we're calling him Stu Unger. I doubt he's ever heard of him. Anyway, Stu makes the call, and we're going 6 ways to the flop. 3, 5, 8. Really great flop for us. We hit a pair, have a flush draw, and also a backdoor straight draw. Even so, I don't see a reason to bet yet. Middle position is likely to continuation bet this flop, even multi-way. We check to him, and he makes it 25. This is not a very big size. If he's got a flush draw, then I'm way ahead, and I have 2 of his outs. If he has a pair, he doesn't have a flush draw. I decide to act the bully and push him around a bit. I raise it up to 85, targeting over cards and pairs. I think he's likely to call with pretty wide range, as it's only 60, and the pot is already 200. Under the gun and Stu both fold, and middle position shoves his whole stack in. It's only about 35 more to call, so I throw in a chip. The turn is a 5 of clubs, river's a 7 of hearts. I hit the river, I know I'm good, I roll my hand over, he looks at the board defeated, gets up, and walks away. Our next hand is in the cutoff. We've got another ace-king. There are 2 limpers, and I make it 20 to go. As the stacks get deeper, I like to open and raise a little larger. This makes it easier to get stacks all in later. Big blind and the first limper make the call. Both of these guys are pretty loose aggressive. The big blind doesn't bluff as much as the other guy, though. The flop comes 10 deuce deuce. It gets checked to me, and of course I'm betting this board. I should be betting pretty small here, probably $10, so this will get junk hands to fold, but some weaker hands might call. And this also helps balance my range. Instead, I make it $20 again. They both fold, and I'm stacking more buddy bucks. Now, the button straddles for 15. The under the gun calls. I've got the Bradley hand. No way I'm folding this. I make the call, expecting others to call, and the straddler to raise it up. At which point, I can re-raise. The middle position, hijack, low jack, small blind. I'll make the call as expected. Now for the button to raise it up. He hates my plan and decides just to check his option. Flop comes 4, 10, 6, all clubs. There's 108 in the pot. It's 7 ways. I check to make sure I have the jack of clubs. I do, but being 7 ways and out of position, I decide on a check. The greatest player in the world, Stu, makes it $60. Under the gun makes the call, and I think about it a while. Stu pretty much never bluffs, so he's got to have either a made hand or the nut flush draw with something. I'm not too worried about the under the gun, but he could also be slow playing a made hand. I reluctantly lay this one down and wait for a better situation. The next hand comes in the cutoff. We're 7-handed. The low jack bets out 12. The hijack calls, and I call on the cutoff with jack 10 suited. The button and small blind call as well. 5 ways to the flop. Queen, jack, 4. Checks around, which often happens in family pots, and the turn is the queen of diamonds. Now that the top card paired the board, it makes it less likely someone has a queen. There is a diamond draw out there now, as well as a straight draw. I'm not letting it check through again. I make it 30, targeting all those draws as well as weak pairs. The button is the only caller. 4 of spades on the river. The board pairs again. The 4 pairing is actually bad for my hand, as he's likely calling with something, which means my jack 10 is losing to a likely king jack, ace jack, or slow played monster. It's also possible he called with a 4 because he has an extremely wide range, calls extremely light, and often gets lucky. I don't think any worse hand is going to be calling a bet here, but he could raise with a worse hand, so I decide to check. If he bets a reasonable amount, I'll have to call. If he checks behind, I'll show the jack 10. He does check behind. I show the jack 10 and win this one. What do you know? Ace King again on the button. This is the night of Ace King. I'm on the button. 2 limpers to me, so I make it 25 to go. The small blind makes the call. Low jack and the cutoff also come along. Flop is 5, 8, 7. Cutoff now leads for 55. If we were heads up, I might make this call, but multi-way with just ace high. I'm going to be folding here. This is a battle I'll probably lose to a flop straight set or an open-ended draw.